of reparations and why we have to be the active participants in our fight for reparations. But before I give way, I just want to take a few moments to talk about the importance, because when we have subject matters such as this that are seemingly, having us as a people divided, we take on a position that our oppressors want us to have, that, hey, we don't need no reparations. We don't deserve reparations. That was a time back then. Our ancestors went through that, and we're doing fine now. Well, you have another group of people saying, well, what are we going to do with reparations? I mean, we don't take care of each other now. We don't know how to provide for each other now. We don't know how to love each other now. And then you have another group of us that's saying, that's not the point. Even if you think that's true, which is not. That's not the point. The point is, reparations is a debt owed that every people who have went even through the most minimal of detrimental effects and the disharming and the dispossession that they have encountered through oppressors and other nations have received a form of reparations, have been repaired, have restitution being paid to them. But we have developed a psychology that works against our own best self-interest. We have taken on a mindset and a mentality that has us causing our own demise and our own detriment relative to something that is legally due to you and I. So this discussion that you and I are going to have tonight, that needs to be at the forefront of every conversation of every black man and woman who live in America, and we prayerfully want to extend this conversation to those in the diaspora that were affected by the transatlantic slave trade and other atrocities caused to our people. But we're going to particularly talk about those in North America, because that is the agenda for this conversation. But we hope that we're able to ignite and inspire those in other places to understand why we're taking on this fight, and the actuality it's a global fight. But back to the point at hand, a mindset. See, to fully understand the task at hand, right, you got to know the history that's involved, that how we got to this point. It was an intellectual scholar in the European world named Ted Koppel who once stated that history is a weapon that politicians use to justify their intentions. But what do? They don't tell the real history. They don't tell the truthful and accurate history. They tell a malign, manipulated history to fit their objective and their agenda. See, the problem with this dispensation of black men and women is that we bought into the lie, that we have been accepting of a manufactured history that does not allow us to understand the importance of what this discussion will bring forth and why reparations is due to you and I. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that history is best qualified to reward its research. We're going to show what that reward is going to be tonight, and we're going to show you why. We're going to lift those like Fannie Lou Hamer, who didn't just advocate for Voting Rights Act just as a symbolism, but understood that it was a tool used to acquire power and to relieve oppression. We're going to talk about Queen Mother Moore and her contributions to the conversation of reparations. We're going to tie it in, but also show why we're here today and why we're demanding that the Democratic Party in this election cycle will not get our vote, will not get our support, nor either other candidate unless they understand the importance of reparation. They put that in the front of their agenda and their objective. So as we enter into this week that is, in my humble opinion, laden with distractions, in particular the black people, they want us to focus on everything outside what's really important, and what we really need to discuss is how that we have reparatory justice, and how do we obtain our reparations. So with that being said, I'm going to close on this point, and I'm going to give way to the Afro-descendant nation president, Dr. Akila Mukuram. But very briefly, I want to say this. We have to reorient our thinking. Listen to what I'm saying. If you do not know, this is not my own word or my teachings. It was somebody much smarter and much more intelligent than me, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But if you do not have a knowledge of self the knowledge of your enemy, and the knowledge of God, you're not going to be successful in this world. Why am I saying that? Because if you don't know who you really are and whose you are, and why we at this point, none of these things that we're doing are going to be beneficial and consequential to us. It's not a religious conversation. It's a legal conversation. It's a national conversation. It's a conversation about identity and how to galvanize around identity so that we can bring into fruition and actualize the power that we have in our unity. That's what this is about. And that's what we want to bring forth. And again, we want you to take this conversation literally serious and understand that, again, if we're going to have anybody get our vote, they're going to have to earn it. And the requisite for earning our vote in this election cycle is understanding that reparations has to be put on the forefront of the agenda and that we have to push that. Ain't nobody else is going to fund our growth, our development, our healing, and our repairment. We have to be the ones that spawn the change that is necessary for our generations to benefit for the things and the decisions that we made in this day and time. Again, I was given 15 minutes, but I want to get right to it because we got some profound and powerful speakers. And I want to hear and I want to learn and I want to continue to grow in the knowledge because, again, we have to be repaired. And that's why reparations have to be at the forefront of the discussion. And so, again, I want us to understand that your framing can't be no longer that we don't deserve it, that we haven't earned it, that we don't know what to do with it, because we do. You may not, but there's enough intelligent men and women who have, for the past several decades, worked out detailed plans and strategies on why and how this thing will be implemented, how it will be used to our benefit, and how it will actually put us on a trajectory of repairing ourselves and becoming a people again that have an identity. That's where we are now. Don't let your oppressor, don't let the enemy, don't let those naysayers try to confuse you with all of the misdirections that make you think that you're not worthy, that this isn't a debt owed. Trust me, if somebody hits you in a car accident, you want your check. But think about 400 plus years of chattel slavery. First, no, to start at the transatlantic slave trade, being in the barrels of the boats, that was the most grotesque and horrendous, atrocious act caused to any humans in recorded history. Then when you got over here, it was multiplied times 100. 200 plus years, and then you go into segregation and Jim Crow South and on and on and on, up until now, benign neglect and all of the other things that were supposed to be progress for us that were given to other people. We've been co-opted and we've been compromised at every turn. And we're saying enough is enough. It's time to pay the debt. With that being said, I'm your brother, I'm your friend, the global ambassador for the Afro-Descendant Nation, Brother Prince Yosef, son of the great Prince ICL, but I want to give way to a leader of mine, my president, our president of the Afro-Descendant Nation, Dr. Akila Mukaram. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Prince Yosef. We appreciate that inspiring message that you open up and welcome us here in this space too. Definitely mindset, like you said. So changing, a shift in our mindset. I would like to greet everyone this evening and assalamu alaikum, our greeting words of peace. And that's for everyone here on the panel and in our viewing audience. As Prince Yosef stated, we're going to be sharing some information that's vital to us as people today. So I will speak on the importance of identity and share the definition of Afro-descendant that I recommended to the distinguished officers of the United Nations third session of the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. Our identity is important because it shapes how we understand ourselves, our place in the world. It fosters our personal confidence. It connects us to our communities and our cultures. It helps us advocate for our rights. Also helps us in understanding and embracing it to build stronger relationships and preserve our cultural heritage. And identity also drives social and political change. As a nation of people, our ancestors were stolen from Africa. They were brought to the Americas and the islands, Caribbean islands, bought and sold as property owned by slave masters. That's a fact. Where is the humanity in that? Our enslaved ancestors were stripped of their identity, their nationality, which has been passed down through generations from enslavement, Jim Crow laws, to systemic oppression and discrimination, of which we are still suffering the lingering effects of to this day as a people, not just individually, as a people, a nation of people. The enslavers of our ancestors deliberately and systematically destroyed the culture of our ethnicity for generations. Our ethnic group of enslaved ancestors were stripped of their language, which has been passed on through generations of us. As a nation of people, we cannot utter our mother tongue. I hope you understand what I'm saying at this point. Our language that we were to inherit
Cannot touch it.
was stripped from our enslaved ancestors. It was completely, systematically beat out of them and destroyed by force. The Afro-descendant nation and the N'COBRA Chicago chapter asked the Democratic National Convention to add reparations to their agenda. We are in support of Reparations United's campaign to earn the Black vote. Why should we just freely give up our vote if you do not support what we want? We want self-determination and reparations. Reparations for Afro-descendant people will begin to repair the ongoing wrong done to Afro-descendants since the inception of this United States of America's government. Since the inception, this United States of America's government has done wrong by Afro-descendants. The evil done to the Black man, Afro-descendants, by the American government far surpasses the evil done by any other government. What other government totally stripped the language from our people? Totally. The language, our language, is our basic human right. The language is a basic human right of any people. We Afro-descendants need our human rights restored. I would say to you, President Joe Biden, remove the 3/5 of a human being clause from your Constitution. You just recently, a few years ago, put into law your anti-lynching law. In the year of the 2000s, 2024, and a law for anti-lynching was just put in place a few years ago. Show us and the world that you are diligently working to become a moral country. As the UN states it, state. A moral state. Show us and the world, United States of America, that you are working diligently to become a moral state. And I'm saying this to the president of the country, so that you can really show that you are abolishing oppression, that your Statue of Liberty was intended to represent. It was to represent the ending of slavery and the abolishment of oppression. To this day, the United States government of America has not followed through on it. And we are still suffering as an Afro-descendant people through oppression. It is in an updated fashion now. African American keeps us absorbed in the United States of America. And the world does not see us as a nation of people. The great emancipator, Abraham Lincoln, stated, "Keep them here as underlings." This has and still is a generational inheritance of ours that the United States, this country, has been doing since its inception. There are a few of us that make it, but as a nation of us, a nation of Black people, of Afro descendants, we still feel the lingering effects of this being treated and kept as underlings. This has been passed down through generations of us, of Afro descendants, here in the United States of America. I would like to share with you now the definition that I shared at the United Nations third session of the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. Afro descendants are people who descend from those who were forcibly dispossessed of their homeland, Africa. Those who were transported to the Americas and the slavery diaspora for the purpose of enslavement. Those who were subjected to slavery. These were our ancestors, and we have inherited those lingering effects of it. Those who were subjected to forced mixed breeding and rape. Those who experienced through force, the loss of mother tongue, culture, and religion, and or those who have experienced racial discrimination due to lost ties or partially lost ties from their original identity. I also recommended that this forum dedicate a specific forum or agenda item for us, Afro-descendants, who fit that definition I just shared. Queen Mashaki Muhammad will share with you how our identity of Afro-descendant and the definition came about. Afro-descendant is our great unifier with that specific definition. And we, the Afro-descendant nation, ask you to take it on, wear it, become wrapped in it, live it, and join on to your brothers and sisters globally, in which we approximately number 250 million Afro-descendants. And let's show the world the power of us, our great nation of Afro-descendants. Thank you. At this time, I would like to bring forth our queen, the queen of the Afro-descendant nation. She is Queen Mashaki Muhammad. She is also our general counsel and is known in her profession as Harriet Abu Bakr, Esquire. Queen Mashaki.
Thank you, President Mukarram, and greetings to all of our listening audience. My husband and my husband is Silas Muhammad, have spent close to 17 years in the UN. During those 17 years at the UN, our fight has been to establish an identity. The identity we chose for ourselves is not just for us here in America, but also Blacks from many nations. We, the Lost Foundation of Islam, have done that. We have gathered together the scattered children of former slaves in the entire slavery diaspora. North America, Central America, South America, and the islands. We have progressed to the point where we had the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights supporting us for an entire week in Chincha, Peru, during a November 2005 UN regional seminar. All you could hear from every UN official speaking and every nation was the term Afro-descendants. That was just one seminar, the culmination, or some say the birth, of Afro-descendants. There were several seminars, and each time we had a seminar, there were some countries that did not show up. But the Lost Foundation of Islam has always been there at every seminar. We saw all of those who came and went. We made a substantial donation towards the expenses of the seminar in Chincha, Peru. And we were sponsors for smaller countries who attended that seminar, all for the purpose of establishing a global identity. Not reparations, but an identity. While reparations is one of our goals, we were not in Peru to gain reparations. What identity? Afro-descendants. The UN has the name Afro-descendants in their records. Chief Osiris Akibela, in his intervention, said, "We want reparations, we demand reparations, we demand that you pay us reparations." After he spoke, we waited for a little while and said, We understand that you cannot pay us reparations. I'll point to the officers of the UN and to Chief Osiris Akabela was that the UN does not pay reparations. People do not come to the UN to get reparations. We went to the UN to be reinstated into the human families of the earth because we were not recognized by the UN prior to them. We did not have human rights. The UN has grouped us with the English, Spanish, and Portuguese-speaking Caucasians in the countries in which we live. We were subsumed in America, and we sought to bring a wedge between us and Caucasians to let the world know we are not Caucasian and that we have a different identity from them. But what is that identity? We are no longer Africans only. Because of the Mediterranean and transatlantic slave trades, we are today scattered into many lands and cultures. Our ancestors, stolen from their homeland, Africa, were forcibly bred and raped and severed from their original identity until we, the descendants, no longer viewed ourselves as Africans only. Neither are we viewed by Africans from continental Africa as Africans, who themselves suffered colonialization. So we were a people lost until we self-identified as Afro-descendants. We did that. The Lost Foundation of Islam, Haiti, Cuba, Guatemala, Jamaica, Uruguay, Brazil, Colombia, Peru, and all. All nations where we had been scattered should have been there. They were welcomed there. The major nations in which we are scattered were present. We verbally gave name to ourselves under the umbrella and protection of the UN, which is what we first went to the UN to do. We asked for forums. We well know that we were not recognized in 2001 by the UN as anything. The UN did not recognize us. We had no voice, no human rights. Our fight in the UN has been to reestablish to the human families of the earth and be recognized by the UN. Once we were recognized by the UN, then we could call upon the UN for assistance, as like other nations can call upon the UN. But when the human rights of citizens are trespassed upon, but first we needed recognition. To gain recognition, we needed an identity. To gain an identity, we gathered and self-identified ourselves. We asked for recognition of our human rights, which is culture, language, religion, etc. While we asked for that, simultaneously members of the Lost Foundation of Islam were functioning as a just government in its early stages for Black people, a government that we invite and encourage all Afro-descendants to become a part of or an ally with. The government has been moving slowly, but it is a government. Governments recognize governments. Recently, an official of the Human Rights Council recommended that individuals have protection. Of their human rights. Now the individual can bring an action to the UN for having his or her human rights violated. Prior to that, only nations could ask for action for protection. Nations have at their roots governments, and the governments of nations could bring actions to the UN. In the first oral statement to the UN in 1997, we asked the UN to do that, to recognize us as a people, separate from the countries in which we live. And the UN did. From 2001 to 2006, the UN allowed us to self-identify and then began calling us by our new name, self-chosen name. There were seminars in Honduras, Canada, Geneva, Durban, Peru, and Chile. During UN-sponsored regional seminars in La Ceiba, Honduras, the Lost Foundation of Islam, for a second time, objected to this new global identity, Afro-descendant. During the seminar, a representative from Brazil, who has the largest Afro-descendant population in the slavery diaspora, stated that they too did not agree with the name Afro-descendant. That was already in use by Latin Americans, but they did acquiesce to establish unity with the many Blacks already using the term. Professor Hosea Bengoa arranged for a special meeting between Cuba and the Lost Foundation of Islam. After hearing the Brazilian delegates' comments and being asked to meet with Cuba, we began to think about the term Afro-descendant. The feel and weight of the term in the atmosphere among the Latin delegates was so great that we decided to concur and use the term like the Brazilians had done. We quickly sketched out a rough definition of Afro-descendants within the 15-minute time frame we had before meeting with Cuba was to get started. And that is the definition that our president has shared with you. A representative from the Office of the UN High Commission for Human Rights translated the meeting between us. The representative of Cuba asked us in Spanish if we had anything to say to her. We replied with the definition for Afro-descendants, showing our agreement, to which the representative showed surprise, or so it seemed from her countenance. In Durban in 2001, while we were still working on our identities, the December 12th movement, headed by Roger Wareham, and including Hera Belafonte, Danny Glover, and many others, was asking for reparations. Some 400 members were present also. America walked out of that meeting. The transatlantic slave trade and reparations was the language spoken in that room in Durban at the WCAR. The World Conference Against Racism was about racism. We acknowledged what the Honorable Roger Wareham was doing, because all Afro-descendants will benefit from the reparations advocates' language. But we well know that the UN cannot pay us reparations. In Durban, at the World Conference Against Racism, the committee who made up the final draft of the transcript of the 2001 WCAR did say that the transatlantic slave trade should be considered a crime against humanity. There is a law in the UN about crimes against humanity. It's referred to as the non-applicability of statutory limitations to war crimes and crimes against humanity. But the US has refused to ratify and sign it. So even if this committee, who wrote the final document, said transatlantic slave trade was a crime against humanity and has always been so, it's just language in the conference documents. It's not binding on the United States. Currently, the UN has a forum called People of African Descent. This forum was presented for the first time during our struggle for UN recognition. The inclusivity of all people of African descent was rejected by us because there were no differences made for those of us who experienced slavery and all the damages we have suffered. We objected to this, and this was noted by the UN officials. They adopted an agenda item called the lingering effects of plantation slavery, which was in place until the UN Commission on Human Rights was suddenly terminated without knowledge and replaced with the Human Rights Council. This happened in 2006. My point is that our fight is reparations, but in addition to reparations, our fight is also for an identity that is recognized by the UN as our belonging to the human families of the earth again. The UN recognizes the process we're going through as ethnogenesis. Silas Muhammad did speak on identity in Durban at the WCAR before the whole body. His message was about identity. So we offer to you, African Americans, a just people, the global identity, Afro-descendant. The term African American is not favored by Latin countries. The measurement of us all is in some 250 million Afro-descendants in the slavery diaspora. In no way does your national identity change unless you change it. We are speaking of global. With that said, we offer to the various groups or organizations among us the following. For accounting and global census purposes, will Black Africans, Black Americans, African Americans, Lalians, New Africans, and other self-declared nations among our people step forward and accept this global identity, Afro-descendant, as did the Lost Foundation of Islam and our brothers and sisters in Brazil. The Afro-descendant nation should approach this Democratic National Convention on reparations. Our experience with the United Nations demonstrates how we can gain recognition when we fight for it. Our people have been fighting for reparations since times of slavery. We need to unite, identify, and get our overdue reparations from the United States. There are many Americans who would fight with us because it is the moral thing to do. Reparations should and must be a Democratic agenda for this election. And with that, I thought I would share with you some photos of the people that were involved in this process I've described to you. And so could we have our slide presentation? Okay, this first presentation shows my husband, Silas Muhammad, and sitting next to him is one of our assistants throughout the years, Ida Lawrence Hakeem. Next slide. Here you see Professor Jose Bengoa of Chile. He is the one that the United Nations asked to work with us in getting all of these seminars organized. And the next slide, you see a group of people sitting at a rostrum, and you can see Afro-descendant expert Gay McDougall. Now, she actually represented the United States at these meetings. Next expert, or next picture. This is a picture of my husband as he was seen in the World Conference Against Racism in 2001, South Africa. We have now some of the pictures from the regional seminars that the United Nations put together from us. In the first picture, you'll see the leader that represented the Uruguay. Next is a leader from Suriname sitting with my husband. Under that was the leader from Cuba. Next to her is the leader from Peru. This is a group picture. It's called a working group. That's a term they use in the UN for the people of African descent in 2004. You can see on the far right, Prince Acabella. Next picture. At the top, at our regional seminar in Peru, 2005, some of you will recognize Queen Mother Dorothy Lewis from Cobra. Right under her is the group of representatives representing the Lost Foundation of Islam and the United States of America. Underneath that group picture, some of our representatives, Ismail Abdul Salam, our current president of All for Reparations and Emancipation. And next to him is our current president's husband, John A. Mukaram. And then another representative from one of the countries in the transatlantic slave trade. On the right, next to Dorothy Lewis, is a picture of the whole group of us that represented the United States and represented the Lost Foundation of Islam. Right under that is the representative from Brazil and her assistant. This is a group shot showing us in La Ceiba, Honduras, I believe, that picture. It's just a group shot of all of us, Afro-descendant leaders. Oh, this is at the Hacienda San Jose, and that was in Chincha, Peru. That's another story in and of its own right. Next picture. Okay, I guess that wraps it up. I've enjoyed talking with you this evening and sharing this history with you, and I hope you will enjoy the rest of our program.
Thank you so much, Queen Mashaki. We really appreciate those inspiring words and that history that you have provided with us this evening. And we look forward to hearing more, because I know you have much more to share with us in our upcoming events and anytime that we come together. Prince Yosei?
Thank you so much again. Thank you so much, our queen. Beautifully, beautifully laid out. As I shared before, see, we have not just those who can give the history, but those who have made history, who've lived it, and then bringing back the requisite information that we need to equip ourselves so that we can be informed in our push for reparations. So without further ado, I want to bring forth our brother who has been instrumental for a number of decades in the fight for reparations and educating our people who have traveled this globe, educating us from the East Coast to the West Coast, to the North, to the South, and even other places in the diaspora. My brother, my friend, the founder of Reparations United, Cam Howard. Please, brother Cam Howard, you got the mic.
Thank you, my brother Yosef. Prince, I should say. It's a pleasure to be introduced by you, and it's a pleasure to be on with the Honorable Harriet Abu Bakr and the Honorable Dr. Akila Mukaram, as well as my sister who's going to follow me, Sister Miranda Alexander, and all others who are here. It's a pleasure to be with you today. This is a very important topic, as it's been shared today. I like to say how this generation of Black folk is not the same as the generation of Black folk in our sister Harriet Abu Bakar's time and those before her in their youth. Those ancestors, they demanded something from the presidents when they put him in office. You go back to Kennedy. Kennedy won 49% of the white vote, and Nixon, who was his challenger, won 51% of the white vote. And at that time, it was only blacks and whites voting primarily in this country. 91% of the voting electorate was white, and 8% was black, and less than 4% was all other. And so if the candidate won the majority of the white vote, you would expect for that candidate to win, since 91% of the voting electorate were white. But that was not the case. The 8% of blacks who voted for Kennedy pushed him over, where he won the Electoral College and actually won the presidency. Blacks made a demand. Our ancestors demanded that president end Jim Crow segregation, end apartheid. And they put that in place over the next 8 or 9 years with his vice president, who became the president after his assassination, Lyndon B. Johnson. They ended apartheid. They signed into law the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and the Fair Housing Act. Those 3 laws, I said, have officially offended apartheid. The next Democrat we put in office was Jimmy Carter. He also lost the majority of the white vote. It was a black vote again that they gave the country that Democratic president. What did he do? Our ancestors demanded that he also do something to challenge racial inequality, and he established signing the law of affirmative action. We know how much we benefited from affirmative action in this country. And then we go to the next Democratic president, Bill Clinton. He didn't win. He lost miserably the white vote. But again, it was a black vote to put him in office. Again, demonstrating our power. And what did he give us? Nothing more than symbolism. Did nothing to challenge the racial inequality, the racial animus that existed in this country, like the 2 previous Democrats. He initiated through executive order a bogus race commission that brought back recommendations that they did nothing with. And then we had Obama. And Obama stated, when we talked about reparations in 2008, he says a non-starter. And I want to define for you non-starter. So I really want you to get where we at today with local as well as federal reparations. Wikipedia defines non-starter as an idea, plan, or person with no chance of success. And that was Barack Obama's reference when we went to him about reparations. It says a non-starter. It had absolutely no chance of success. Don't even talk to me about it. That was his belief. And in fact, during his presidency, not only did he not do anything around race relations, he stated that, or the country stated, we were in a post-racial society by electing him into president. And then we fast forward to Biden. Biden has given us rhetoric. When he won, he said, you know, you blacks, you had my back and I'm gonna have your back. That's rhetoric, that's just words. We went to him stating what we wanted was reparations. We wanted to push this reparations issue forward in the form of an executive order that the president can do. We started that conversation actually during the Democratic Convention. And during the Democratic Convention, the last one in 2020, they put a reparations commission into the plank. It was there. The HR 40 was in the plank for the first time. And so when he became president, he was supposed to push that, but he didn't. Not only did Obama say it was a non-starter, he also talked about in 2016, his last year of his presidency, I was with NARC. I'm still with NARC, the Commission on NARC. We presented Obama with an executive order for a reparations commission. I was fortunate to be appointed to be the lead writer of that executive order. We wrote it. We had his law professor, Charles Ogletree, to present it to him. So we know he got it, and he ignored it. He came out and said, well, that's not any political will for reparations. I understand it in theory. This is from 2008 to 2016. He shifted. He said, I understand it in theory, but there's no political will. So let me define with you what political will means, because it's very important we understand these concepts that the leaders of this country are stating. It's important that we understand these terms they're using. So political will is defined as the extent of committed support among key decision makers for a particular policy solution to a particular problem. And what does that mean in the context of reparations? It is, what is the extent of committed support from key legislators or decision makers around public policy, which is a reparations commission or some type of reparations policy, to the problem of the continued injury from the crimes committed against our humanity and those of our ancestors. That's the problem. There's continued injury, and that injury is going to go on into perpetuity, as we have seen, until there's targeted resources. So that's what reparations is about, targeted resources for these continued impact and injuries that we suffer and from the crimes committed against our ancestors and the continued crimes that are committed today amongst us as we speak. And Wikipedia also says lack of political will is often blamed for unresolved political issues. And we know this issue is unresolved. So lack of political will has been blamed for this issue being unresolved. So what is the political will at this point? Is there political will at this point? Is there committed support among key decision makers for this issue of reparations to address the continued impact we suffer? And we started the reparations, we started the Earn the Black Vote Coalition and Collaborative because we understood there's tremendous political will at this particular time. There's tremendous support by key decision makers in this country for reparations. It's just that the president is not in alignment with those other leaders, key decision makers. And who are those key decision makers? In the 117th Congress, we had 88% of democratically elected legislators in the House and in the Senate. If you add them all up together who supported our HR 40 and S40, the two reparations bills, 88%, almost 90% of Democrats elected in Congress, in the 117th Congress, supported those bills. That's tremendous political will. That's tremendous support, evidentiary support for reparations. Then we move from the federal level to the state level. The three largest cities in this country, the states where those cities exist, the governors have signed reparations bills. The three largest municipalities in America, those states have reparations commissions. That again is tremendous support by key decision makers. And then we look at all the cities, starting with Evanston, Illinois, which is actually given reparations in the form of $25,000 to over 300 some people, close to $3 million that they, almost $4 million that they distributed. And not only do they have to be used for housing, they can be used for anything. So they're getting actual $25,000 checks in Evanston because they're key decision makers in that particular city. And all of these decision makers happen to be Democrats. There's no decision maker in America that has demonstrated political will for reparations in the Republican Party, not one. And so we have to be clear on that as well. But just because they demonstrated political will, they don't just continue to get our vote at the federal level, at the presidential level, until they act, until the president, in this case Biden, acts as the Congress have already acted, and acted as some states have already acted, state executives, and as some city executives have already acted. Chicago mayor created a reparations commission by executive order. It didn't go through the caucus. It didn't go through the council for a vote. He did that by executive order. The same thing we're demanding of Biden to do right now is an executive order. Now, Biden, we demonstrated that there's political will at every level of government. Federal, in Congress, state, with these state and in cities. The only elected official that is out of step with his party at this particular time is Joe Biden. And if Kamala wins then it's her as well, because she hasn't made a firm commitment to reparations at this time either. And I want to end with this. Joe Biden and now Kamala Harris is referring to their support for reparations by saying we support the legislative process. I wanted to go through the legislative process. I believe that, yes, I firmly support reparations, but I believe that it should go through the legislative process. Well, what they're saying is it's a non-starter. When I go back, there's no possibility of success. And there is no possibility of success for this going through the legislative process. Both Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were senators. Joe Biden, 30 plus years in the Senate. Kamala Harris, probably 8 years. In the Senate, they know there are rules, and rules around the filibuster. In certain legislation, like HR 40, like S40 in the Senate, will be filibuster. It's no question. You need 6, and filibuster is just, we're going to keep the debate going, never bring it to a vote. And after so long, when it's clear that there's not going to be a vote, the bill just dies that way. In order to block a filibuster, you need 60 votes in the Senate. We will never get 60 votes in the Senate unless you got 60 Democrats. Not a single Republican will will cross the party line and vote for this bill. So it's absolutely no chance at all that this bill can be passed legislatively. And so when they say that, they really think that we're stupid, that we're dumb, that we don't know the political process. We cannot allow them to say, I think it should go legislatively, when you know, as a former senator, that it cannot pass legislatively. It might pass out of the House if we get a Democratic-controlled House, but it'll never pass out of the Senate. The only way this bill can be moved forward is through executive order. And we have to push back hard every time they say this foolishness about a legislative process that has to go through the legislature, and when they know it cannot happen. As if we're children politically. It's like as if we don't have any political maturity. And we do have political maturity. And the fact that we have this political maturity is why we say they must earn our vote, and we're not just going to give it to them. So with that, I'm just going to conclude and say thank you for this opportunity to share. And also, on Wednesday, during the Democratic Convention, we're leading, Earn the Right Vote is having a reparations strategy session, post-convention to inauguration, and a watch party at the DuSable Museum of African American History. From 2 to 5 would be our strategy session. We've identified 4 targets. And of those 4 targets, we want 3 action plans, national action plans, to initiate our demand within these 4 targets. And so we'll share those 12 initiatives. Hopefully we get 12. We can get 8, 2 per target, then we just go with that. But whatever we get, we're going to share nationally, where any organization or individual can say, I'm going to jump in right here. I'm going to lead that. We're going to push this action. And this is our way that we continue to make this demand while there's significant political will for this issue of reparations in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brother Cam Howard. Again, that was beautifully articulated. Those listening, it's not too late. Please, if you haven't shared, share the link, share this live. If you have shared it, find someone else to share it to. And if you are a recipient from somebody who shared it with you, don't be selfish. Continue to pass on the love, because this information isn't just edifying. It's a call to action that allows us to have another level of understanding so that we can have the empowerment that is needed to overcome our circumstance and situation. So without further ado, for our main presenter tonight, and I'm just so excited myself to hear the presentation, because this one has been put together so thoroughly, so meticulously, and it has chronicled so many aspects of information when it comes to reparations and the history of reparations and what it actually means to receive reparations and the dynamics that are around it that we have been informed about, that we have not been properly educated about. So this particular sister, who is so intelligent and so articulate, will give you a succinct understanding on what we're doing and why we're doing it and why the time is now. So without further ado, I want to bring forth the co-chair of Cobra chapter here in Chicago. That's where I'm at. We're in Chicago. Our sister, our friend, Miranda Alexandria. Miss Miranda, you have the floor.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Chris Yosef. Like, thank you for hyping me up. I really appreciate you. That's number one. And thank you again for Dr. Mukaram for inviting me to be here tonight. Like, amazing. And Queen Mashaki, thank you so much for all the work that you've done and getting us the term and going and back and forth to the UN. Thank you. And of course, Brother Cam Howard, you are amazing. You laid a lot of the groundwork for what I'm doing right now. So thank you. Thank you so much for your dynamic presentation. Yes, my name is Miranda Alexandria. I am the co-chair of the Chicago and Cobra chapter, which y'all have to know that the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America has been around since 1987. Okay, one of the premier reparations organizations that has been doing this work for a very, very long time. And in addition to that, in the social media realm, I am also known as Queen AF USA, where I am trying to use my social media platform to challenge our white patriarchal heteronormative societal factors that we live by. And so we all can live as first-class citizens, which I think is very important. So with that said, we are here to challenge the Democratic National Convention to embrace the concept of reparations, that reparations is not a fantasy, but a reality. And of course, you come into Chicago, where we have a state commission and a city task force. Best believe it's time to add reparations to the agenda. So even though it might not be popular amongst all citizens of the United States, I think it is the Democrats' responsibility to make it popular, right? It's time for America to live up to the ideals that it has branded itself as, which is freedom and liberty and all these other things, but not for us. And that is where we have to right the original wrong. And just because their most loyal voting bloc is us, just like Brother Cam Howard stated already. We have been their most loyal voting bloc. So they have to prioritize our not only wants, but our needs. So with that said, I think that it's time that we focus on the fact that reparations is a process. Number one, it's not just about money, it's a mindset that we have to all adopt, every one of us. And due to that, right? Because this is a historic election, right? With Kamala Harris becoming the presidential nominee. It is time. The time is now. So all I want to say is that this process is not only generational, it's practical and it's necessary. And it's not just about the enslavement era, but everything that has happened post-enslavement that has hindered and stymied our progress towards growth and becoming the people that we should have been already if this tragic, horrific crime against humanity had never occurred. So with that said, we could go ahead and start the presentation. Thank y'all so much for listening to that little rant. Okay. Now, I just want to make sure that we are clear that thank you again to Dr. Mukaram for explaining the term Afro-descendant to us. And with that, we want to appreciate again Queen Mashaki for explaining how the term originated. And give big ups to our brother Cam Howard for letting us know where we are with reparations at the moment and why it's so important that they earn our vote, right? To earn the Black vote. All right, now let's talk about what reparations actually are, right? They are actions that are taken to repair, heal, and restore us because we have been injured due to our group identity of being Afro-descendants. Because of this fundamental violation of our human rights that has been committed, not only limited to governments, but to corporations, by corporations, religious and academic institutions, and individual families. And these reparations that we're looking for need to be proportional and match the scale of the harm that has been committed. And when there is an apology issued, we need to make sure that there are additional measures that are implemented that change the material conditions for the individuals and communities that have been harmed. Okay, so that is the definition of reparations, right? Of course, a debt owed. Don't forget that part. Now, as we move on to understanding what is restitution, restitution is the act of returning or compensating losses and damages that have been incurred by individuals due to the wrongful actions and injustices. This is going to restore the victims to the position that they were in before the harm occurred to the extent possible. And this acknowledges the suffering of the victims to provide tangible forms of redress. And this is going to help promote a sense of closure and reconciliation and to heal these wounds and contribute to the broader goals of course, seeking to prevent future harm, right? So as we continue on, we're going to talk more about reconciliation, because we can only have reconciliation once reparations and restitution have occurred. Now, this is a process that will acknowledge and address the past wrongs and the harms inflicted on these individuals and groups, which America has yet to do. And it encompasses actions that are taken to repair the relationships and promote healing, to restore a sense of justice and dignity to those who have been victimized. This will include various measures such as apologies, reparations, truth-telling, accountability, and efforts to prevent future harm, which is key to reparations. And of course, seeks to foster an understanding, empathy, and mutual respect between the perpetrators and the victims, with the ultimate goal of building a more inclusive and harmonious society. Because we have to understand, as we continue through this journey, reparations, it needs to be seen as not only this process, but basically the idea of how are we going to ground these policies into reality. And we can continue. Okay. And people might ask, reparations for, right? Why reparations? Enslavement happened so long ago. Well, that's only one aspect of why we need reparations. Of course, the original harm, right? The original violation needs to be compensated for. The failed policies of Reconstruction that basically try to enshrine a caste system in this country. And of course, that has developed into the mass incarceration system that we know today. Jim Crow, the Black codes, the segregation that was created, the political disenfranchisement that didn't allow for us to pick our own leadership. And of course, the school to prison pipeline, which basically fuels the mass incarceration system, but also affects our education and does not allow us to become educated on our terms, learning our history and things that are relevant and important to us as a people. The Red Summers that happened in about the 1919s, 1920s, when that was happening, right? Lynchings, racial terror, the reason why there had to be why there had to be a mass exodus out of the South, why there was a great migration. There it is. And then, of course, redlining, the confiscation of land, destructions of cities and towns, medical experimentation. We all have heard, well, most of us have heard of the story of Tulsa and Rosewood and the way that they destroyed towns, or way they have confiscated land due to eminent domain, and making sure that we stay out of certain areas so we wouldn't allow ourselves to build a community. And of course, the war on drugs that started under Nixon's administration, and it's continuous to this day. That, again, fuels the mass incarceration system. The welfare queens, which started, I want to say in the 1970s, when the term was coined because one woman and had basically taken advantage of the welfare system through fraud. And so now it becomes a term that is synonymous almost with Black single mothers. And then the super predator trope, which happened under the 1990s and the Bill Clinton administration, where these politicians ran with this idea of the crack epidemic babies being super predators and more predisposed to crime. So these are the things that we need reparations for that are just not in the enslavement era, but have continued to hinder our progress. And we can continue. And I know everyone is like concerned with, well, what about the 40 acres and a mule? I knew about reparations when we talked about 40 acres and a mule. Well, to give you a little history, in 1865, General William Tecumseh Sherman issued Special Field Orders number 15 that promised those 40 acres and a mule to emancipated families. Now, this order allocated land in 40-acre parcels along with mules to aid in farming. Now, 40,000 acres were earmarked for the settlement on the Sea Islands and inland areas, with some families receiving mules from the military stores. Now, the land allocations had a strict prohibition on white settlement, and it was supposed to be a designated region just for us. Now, unfortunately, President Andrew Johnson overturned this order in the fall of 1865 and returned the land along the South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida coast to the planters or slave owners who originally owned it. And that is basically the failed promise of the 40 acres and a mule. And as we continue, I want to let you know that there, I believe, have been ancestors. We can go to the next slide. In the reparations movement. And first, we're going to start with the women. And if you don't know, hopefully everyone knows how to use QR codes. But if you want to learn more information on these ancestors as we continue, you can take a screenshot and make sure you have a phone with a camera and you scan these QR codes in order to gain more information about each one of these powerful women. Now, Belinda Sutton, she was freed and she was promised a, I guess, pension from her former slave owner before he passed away. And unfortunately, she had to petition the royal family's estate for her pension. And fortunately, she won, but she had to do it again and again and again. And even to the point where I think someone had just wanted to stop paying her, but she had to continue to petition the court in order to get what she needed. And I believe this was in the 1780s. So moving on, we have Henrietta Wood, who unfortunately, she was a free woman and she was captured into slavery. And she sued for $20,000 in reparations for 500 years for each year that she was illegally captured and forced into slavery. And unfortunately, she only received $2,500. But these are two cases of women who have won reparations petitions or lawsuits and have won. Now, Callie House, born in 1861. So you have to remember, she is of the generation when she was growing up after the Civil War. She was a teenager. By the time she was a teenager, the Civil War had ended for about 15 years or so. Now, she was the leader of the National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief, Bounty, and Pension Association, because she knew, living in that generation, that they needed to have compensation for what had happened to her recently freed parents and ancestors. But of course, they imprisoned her because they said she should have known and was committing fraud, because she should have known that the American government were never going to pay reparations. And then, of course, we have Queen Mother Audley Moore, founder and president of the Universal Association of Ethiopian Women, Committee for Reparations for Descendants of U.S. Slaves, and the Republic of New Africa. And this woman has done so much for our current reparations movement that you're going to have to look her up and do the QR code, because there's just so much information about her. But we're going to continue on into our male representatives of who was in the movement, the reparations movement. Of course, we have Dr. Conrad Worrell, who was a writer, educator, activist, talk show host, involved in the Million Man March, National Black United Front, and most likely a mentor to a lot of our reparations leaders today. Then, of course, we have Reparations Ray Jenkins. in Michigan who founded the Slave Labor Annuity Pay Organization and who heavily inspired H.R. 40. And Representative John Conyers Jr., a Democratic Michigan representative who introduced the bill H.R. 40 in 1989 and every year until his retirement in 2017. And Amari Obadeli, the Black Power activist, reparations advocate, and college professor, co-founder of the Republic of New Africa in Cobra, and so many more. And there are so many more people who have worked on the reparations movement, including our now dearly departed Sheila Jackson Lee, who we lost this year due to pancreatic cancer, who took up the mantle of H.R. 40 after the passing or after the retirement of John Conyers Jr. And of course, we have Baba Hannibal Afrique, who has done so much work, especially here in Chicago, for the reparations movement. So I'm not saying that they're honorable mentions. I'm just trying to work in some more space into our presentation so we can add them in. So I want to just say thank you to all those ancestors who have come before us and who have laid the groundwork for this work that we continue to do today. So we can go ahead and let's know what H.R. 40 is, right? Because some of us don't know, because we have to understand that this presentation is not for our reparations expert. This presentation is for some of us who have no idea what reparations are. Okay, now this is a bill that is meant to address the fundamental injustice, cruelty, brutality, and inhumanity of slavery in the United States and the 13 American colonies between 1619 and 1865. And this is meant to establish a commission to study and consider a national apology and proposal for reparations for the institution of slavery, and its subsequent de jure and de facto racial and economic discrimination against Afro-descendant people in the U.S., and the impact of these forces on living Afro-descendants to make recommendations to the Congress on appropriate remedies and for other purposes. So this is what we're fighting for. This is what we're telling Joe Biden to make an executive order so it can be passed into law before Kamala Harris even becomes president, because that's what we vote. I mean, we say and earn our vote, but a Trump presidency, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to keep going with the presentation. So with that being said, and I want you guys to be interactive online. Put things in the comments, right? So these are some reparationist organizations. And if you know any that I did not list out, please put them in the comments. Let's be interactive. So the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, also known as NCOBRA, the Reparations Education Project, All for Reparations and Emancipation, AFRE, Reparations United, First Repair, Twins Island Project, the Kelby Family Endowed Scholarship Fund, Movement for Black Lives, the National African American Reparations Commission, NARC, who was previously mentioned by Cam Howard, Reparations for Slavery, the Howe Scholarship Endowment, African Descendants of Slavery Advocacy Foundation, also known as ADOS, and National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants, NASD. Okay, so again, if you know some that I did not say, please put them in the chat, because we all have to work together to make sure that this happens. We can go ahead. And I want you to think, when you start listening to people talk about different reparations policies, how does it fall into these areas that we are about to start talking about? So first, we have the 5 injury areas. We have been injured in our person/peoplehood. So as individual people, we endure these harms, but collectively as a people, we endure these harms. We have been injured in our health, our economic, or also known as our intergenerational poverty, education, and of course, through criminal punishment, thanks to the 13th Amendment that freed us, but unfortunately can still be a punishment in case of the commitment of a crime. And is it a coincidence that mass incarceration exists 6 times more likely for us than our white counterparts? Just a question. So as we continue on, we'll talk about the remedy areas, right? The 5 forms of reparations. Restitution, which we already previously spoke about, which is the full restoration of victims' rights, property, or citizenship status to their original condition. Rehabilitation, the legal, medical, and psychological and physical support. Compensation, financial recompense for loss, injury, and suffering. Satisfaction, the acknowledgments of guilt, apology, burials, construction of memorials, and etc. And of course, the most important form of reparation, which is the guarantees of non-repetition, or known as cessation. That is the reformation of laws and civil political structures that led to and or fueled the injury itself. And that is one that we definitely need to nail down. And as we continue on, let's see. What we have next. Oh, nope. There we go. All right. Doesn't look like it's working. Warren's moving on to the next. I'm not frozen, am I? But that's okay, because I'm going to tell y'all what's going on next anyway. Hopefully that the presentation works. But we're going to talk about the 4 periods of harm that we have endured, which is the colonial enslavement period that happened from 1619 to 1787. And in the United States enslavement period, which is from 1787 to 1865. The Jim Crow segregation era, which is 1865 to 1965. And the Neo-Jim Crow, or the post-civil rights era, which is the 1965 until now. So when you think about these policies, is the policies directly affecting one of these periods, okay? And as we continue, we have to think about the 5 reparative levels of government. Of course, we have international, especially when we're going and talking to the UN. We have to think about how can we be repaired internationally? What is the federal government responsible for when it comes to our repair? How has the state injured us, right? And how the state is responsible for reparations efforts. In addition to not only county, we have county governments and we also have city governments. So these are the different levels of government that our reparations policies have to take on. So if you're talking about a policy, is the policy on the state level? Is it on the federal level? Is it on the city level? So we have to make sure that when we're thinking about our reparations policies, what level of government is it affecting? All right. And next, we have 2 reparation types. Okay. So specific and general. So the reparations that are specific are going to focus on a particular harm that is done to specific victims. They may be easier to quantify the number of victims and repair measures, and maybe easier to authenticate the victim status. Now, you guys can give some examples if you want to in the comments. Some that I think of are, especially here in Chicago, the John Burge torture victims, right? The victims of the Tulsa race massacre, the victims of Rosewood, the family of, that owned Bruce's Beach. These are specific reparations type that are going to affect specific people. And when it comes to general, we're going to talk about reparations measures that focus on broader harms done to people within a shared group identity. More difficult to quantify in number, and the victim and repair measures, right? The number of victims and repair measures, and it may be more difficult to authenticate the victim status. So, for example, not being able to gain employment, right? Or being denied loans for homes, or business loans. These are things that might be more general, because it's hard to quantify the number of people who maybe applied for these loans, may have thrown that paperwork away, who knows, right? Or this might have happened to a family member back in the day, and you can't authenticate this particular harm. And as we continue, I want to talk about the 2 tracks that we have to take when it comes to reparations, and whether the policies fall under the external tract or the internal tract. Now, first, the external tract has to address repair that has been caused by, and the remedy is going to require outside intervention. So this is providing land / financial compensation, supporting the creation and preservation of cultural heritage sites, the investing in education and training programs that help affected communities rebuild and thrive, and of course, supporting efforts to address health and environmental issues. Now, the internal tract, now these are going to be actions that focus on repairing the harm and its root causes that we perpetuate and perpetrate within our communities due to the external injuries. Now, this also includes building the necessary infrastructure to not only receive, measure, but sustain external reparation or reparative efforts. So this is going to include the creation of financial institutions and an industry, the independent education systems, right, that go outside of our city or local education systems, restorative justice programs instead of our known criminal justice system, land cultivation, showcasing local art and culture, and of course, relationship building and healing. These are some things that we're going to have to work on internally in order to make sure that our reparative efforts are sustainable. And as we continue, we talk about two types of relief. So there's immediate relief and gradual relief. So first, when it comes to immediate, this is going to be the swift alleviation of distress, pain, or discomfort. This is going to be quick action taken to address an urgent need, and it aims to stabilize the situation and prevent further deterioration of the condition or circumstances. And if you guys have some examples of what looks like immediate relief, right? Does that look like exemption from taxes? Does that look like stimulus checks? What does immediate relief look like for us? And then, of course, we have gradual, the slow alleviation of reduction of distress, pain, or discomfort over a period of time. So these types of relief are going to take time in order to show that they're actually working. Steady progress and improvement. The consistent therapy, self-care, support systems that allow for individuals to cope and recover at our own pace and address the root cause of the issue, leading to more sustainable and long-term solutions, right? So does that look like creating doula programs in order to lower our infant and maternal mortality and morbidity rates, right? And that won't be the last time I use that example. So, or do we invest in our HBCUs to make sure that our education systems are funded to properly educate our young adults so that they can become, productive members of society, not only in traditional sense, but in a sense that works for us as a people. So we can continue on. And next, we're going to try to focus on every area of life that we can foresee. So first, we're going to start with history, which includes the teachings of critical race theory, Black American history, West African history, Caribbean history, right? More history, understanding not only the enslavement here in the United States, but where it took place in all of the Americas, where we're going to talk about how our history is basically a real accounting of our history and not what has been force-fed to us. Education, our elementary system, secondary education, post-secondary education, graduate and technical and skill. What policies can we make that affects us in this area? The legal system, when it comes to policing, the courts, incarceration, and of course, post-incarceration, because that is an issue as well. When it comes to politics and voting, making sure that we have viable candidates, that we have a well-informed electorate, and of course, accessibility to the ballot. We need to be able to vote. When it comes to our culture that we have lost, when it comes to music, dance, art, food, language, rituals, and clothing. And when it comes to the environment / land, When it comes to housing, our communities that we live in now, our natural resources. And of course, that includes land cultivation, that includes the farming and agriculture. When it comes to government and legislation, we have to deal with funding allocation, policy creation, policy implementation, and of course, because everything is going to be measured up to strict scrutiny, policy interpretation. Because best believe once we get these policies rolling, people are going to challenge them, most likely in the highest court of the land. So we have to make sure it stands up to that. And of course, military service involvement. When it comes to spirituality, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, spiritual, and atheism, because all of us accompany some level of spirituality and how that has been taken away from us as well. When it comes to media, social media, the news, cinema, or as we know, the movies, broadcasting and publishing. When it comes to healthcare, emotional and behavioral health, mental and physical health. And of course, we have to measure our mortality rates. When it comes to economics, we're talking about employment, personal finance, entrepreneurship, and of course, business development. And last but not least, relationships. A relationship, it first starts with self. And then, of course, we have to examine our familial relationships, our intimate relationships, and our social relationships. So these are all areas where we need to focus our policies. When it comes, and we go to the next, when it comes to policies, we need to figure out what area of life is it affecting? Is it affecting us at birth? Is it affecting people in childhood? Is it affecting people in adolescence or in their adulthood? Or of course, their elderhood? These are all things we have to consider when looking at reparations policies. And of course, there will be gender implications. And again, this is where I bring up maternal mortality and morbidity rates. And if you guys got some, like I said, some examples that you like to include, make sure you put those in the comments, okay? So, of course, that is going to affect women. But we also have to think, how does it affect the males in our society? Right? So these are things that we have to start thinking about when we think about reparations in order to ground these ideas into reality on what it is that we need as a community and as a nation. So, and then next we have to get our heavy influencers involved in this conversation. So that includes our faith-based communities, right? Our sororities and fraternities who have huge influences. Entertainers, influencers, historians, and people in academia, and of course, media outlets. All these people or communities have the ability to heavily influence how we think about these reparations policies. Okay, and as we continue, there are some issues that need to be discussed in the movement. Some of these issues, and I think a lot of our leaders, we have to come together and have some honest coming to Jesus moments, if you will, to talk about these things honestly and openly, which includes intergenerationality and gatekeeping, reparations versus what's considered equitable policy, right? Talking about public support and engagement, making sure that people like yourself are engaged and making sure that we have the numbers to support what we need to do for our people. Lack of organization and infrastructure, eligibility and designation status, right? Versus lineage-based versus race-based versus harm-based, right? We have to have these conversations. And last but not least, but of course, funding, right? Funding is a huge issue in the movement that we need to talk about and discuss, and how we have to move these things forward. So the question then becomes, what can you do as the public, right? How can I be helpful to this movement? Don't worry, I got you. So first, we have to educate ourselves more on this subject of reparations and share this information with our immediate circles and beyond. We have to engage our public representatives on this issue. I don't care if it's your alderman, your state senator, your state representative, your federal representative, or your federal senator. We have to talk to the people who represent us to let them know that this is important to us. We have to engage with organizations and campaigns on this issue. People who are doing the work in this space. How can you engage with them? How can you help them? How can you support them? And one big way to do that is number 4, which is show up when called to action. That means via making phone calls, sending out emails, or attending events and things of that nature. These are the ways in which you can directly help progress the reparations movement. So next, I believe we have what we are working on. I might have 2 slides that are the same. Okay. So at Chicago and Cobra chapter, we are hosting and trying to gain more support for events for this presentation itself, so we can get the word out. We are sharing our Illinois petition of support to make sure that people know that our commission exists and that they support our commission's work. We are supporting the Chicago Reparations Task Force in whatever form that takes. Maybe somebody else got some more information than I do as how we're progressing with that, but best believe I'm on top of learning more as we continue on. And of course, in Cobra national space, we are planning and engaging a year of healing, because I think that a year of healing is important, because we as a people have faced so many traumatic experiences that not only affect our personal, but affect our work in the organization. So we have to figure out, how do we respond to these different levels of trauma and how we continue to move forward. And of course, we're about to start conducting a phone campaign to urge Joe Biden within his lame duck session to issue an executive order for HR 40. So next, again, if you have screenshot capabilities, we have resources and toolkits for you to be able to access. Oh, wait, can we go back 1 slide? I'm sorry. Go back 1 slide. And if you want to learn more about what we're working on, we do have a QR code for join the Cobra Chicago and Cobra newsletter. So I want you all to join that. Okay, we can go ahead and move it forward. I always forget to do things like that. Making sure we get people joining the newsletter. Resources and toolkits, we have a map of redress activities, reparations task force, and truth-telling projects in America. We also have reparations historical timeline from 1773 through 2023 by the United States government, cities, states, religious institutions, universities, corporations, and communities. And if you want toolkits made by the Why We Can't Wait Coalition and the Movement for Black Lives, they have some wonderful reparations toolkits to help teach yourself more about reparations outside of this presentation that go to in a little bit more depth and detail. And with that said, I'm hoping that we are able to drop this in the chat, but we have a Google form that we wish for you to take that will let us know how we're doing with these presentations and putting lives like this together, and whether or not the information is relevant to you, if you are likely to use this information in the future, if the resources provided were relevant to you, and if you're likely to share this live, right? And if the presentations were interesting, and would you share this live with other people? So with that being said, I just want to say thank you all to who are here, who are watching this presentation, for being here, and to make sure that we all keep each other accountable to doing this work. And again, I just want to thank all my fellow presenters for being here and allowing me to occupy this space with you all. It has been amazing. And in case you want to follow my social media, because again, I forget to do that, it is Queen AF USA on Instagram and TikTok. Thank y'all so much for having me here.
That was absolutely phenomenal. Oh my God. Again, as we started this conversation, we started this call to action. We started it with the reality of reparations and what's needed, where we are, where we've been, and where we need to go. And so you've heard from the Queen. You've heard from the Afro-Descendant Nation president. You heard from Cam Howard. You heard from our beautiful sister, Miranda. You've heard from these articulate, intelligent, motivated, and consistent brothers and sisters who have brought forth a concrete plan and actionable steps to bring into fruition a call and a demand to the DNC about the importance of reparations. So we're at the point now where we need your participation. Again, take this information and use it and share with all of those who you know are impacted by this, whether they know it or not. But we also, the information, we have a plebiscite that we want you to go visit, we want you to fill out, we want you to sign up for. Is that information in the chat? If it is, please let me know. Also, we want you to join, first be familiar with what the Afro-descendant nation is. Read about our literature, study and understand what we have been doing on behalf of the Africans in the diaspora and why it is important to have an identity. And then join. You already a member, whether you understand it or not, so go through the necessary protocols and procedures to make it literal and tangible. And thirdly, we want you to donate. And all of those links should be in there. Madam President, are we able to get those links and that information in the chat so that the people can have access to it?
Yes, sir. Shahid should be able to put it in the chat.
So before
the plebiscite number, we can give that number out now if you would like for me to do that.
Please, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. So you're going to type the word reparations to 877-506-2184. Again, type the word reparations with an S to 877-506-2184.
Do we also have the
Shahid,
information? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go right ahead, Prince Jose.
No, ma'am. I was asking the information for the Afro-descendant nation.
Okay, for the Afro-descendant nation, you can go to afrodescendant.org, and there is a place on there to donate to the Afro-descendant nation to help us with the work that we're doing moving forward. And hopefully Shahid will have some of the other ones as well. There's a way to submit a Cash App donation if some people prefer Cash App as well. Okay, so again, for our plebiscite, please type the word reparations with an S to 877-506-2184. Let your voices be heard. Declare that you are Afro-descendant. And let's shake up the world. Thank you, Prince Jose.
Thank you, Madam President. Again,
You're welcome.
I believe that's everything that will conclude this live stream. And again, when you sign up for those information, you will also get further information on different events that we have, other information that will be forthcoming relative to our fight for reparations and the necessity of having the DNC put that on their agenda. So again, I want to thank all of the speakers that spoke today and all of those who are in the listening audience. We thank you. We appreciate you, because you could have been any other place. There's a number of things that could have grabbed your attention, but you chose to be here because you understand the importance of this conversation and the necessity that it will precipitate to the change, the trajectory of our people. So again, we're so appreciative for all of those who took the time to listen and to be a part of this discussion. I thank you, and I greet you in the words of peace. Assalamu alaikum, shalom alaikum, peace be unto you. Thank you all.
Recording stopped.
He's still live streaming.
So my laptop it's still streaming. Oh, okay, the information is up. I think it's a delay. It's a delay on my laptop. So let's just wait for a moment.